And now for more on this, Rod Wheeler, former Washington, D.C. Metro homicide detective, Garland Nixon, talk radio host and retired police major in the state of Maryland. Gentlemen, appreciate you being with us. Wish it was under better circumstances. Rod, as we listened together to the news conference out of Minnesota, right, it was almost shocking to hear the FBI guy go, oh, this is a potential act of terrorism. They have him talking about Allah. They have him asking people who he stabbed, are you Muslim, before stabbing them. And then you have ISIS saying this guy was a soldier of the caliphate. What else do they want?
You know, what else do they want? What else do they need? And I'll tell you, I don't like to second-guess others in law enforcement. I never have, never will. But I must say that we have to get to the point, Leland, in this country where we call situations what they are. I mean, if ISIS thinks this guy is part of their organization, why don't we think that? And ISIS has already released a statement saying that this guy is a student of them. So, you know, why aren't we calling this what it is? And then we have to look at the fact that this guy is in an area, St. Cloud, Minnesota, whereby we know that there's groups of individuals that are Muslim Somalis that have talked about causing harm to the United States before. There's been 9 arrests, Leland, over the past year or so where the FBI has arrested individuals known to be associated with ISIS and other groups. Right. So you're right. It's about time we start calling this what it is.
Well, it certainly seems that way. Now there's this debate going on in New York about whether it's terrorism or not. You ask the governor, he says it is. You ask the mayor, he says he doesn't know. But Garland, do you take off your talk radio hat for a minute, put on the law enforcement hat? You have to think that you have Minnesota, you have New York, you have New Jersey. You'd have to believe in a lot of different things to think that all of these happening on the same day just was some coincidence.
Yeah, there's some other commonalities here. I mean, these were fairly kind of brute force attacks. These didn't seem to be very well thought out incidents. If you look at the Minnesota, of course, it was a knife. He didn't have a high-tech weapon. If you look at the other two, in New Jersey, of the 3 explosive devices that they used, only one of them went off. In New York, of the 2 they used, only one of them went off. So we see whoever did this wasn't sophisticated. But and to me, the commonality here is that it wasn't a very sophisticated nor effective attack, which leads me to believe that we're looking more at someone who was inspired by ISIS as opposed to groups who were inspired by ISIS as opposed to who were directly able to use their knowledge and ability.
Boy, Rod, in some ways it's comforting that there's not a large group of people out here who have, you know, cells of well-trained, highly sophisticated operatives here to carry out another 9/11 style attack. On the other hand, it's terrifying that you can have one guy in a shopping mall in Minnesota and another couple people tinkering around with pressure cookers in their basements off of what they've learned on the internet and do what they did on Saturday night in America.
That's right. Well, we know the guy in the mall in Minnesota. He was probably inspired. Then again, he could have been affiliated with some recognized organization. But I got to beg the difference with my co-panelists in terms of the level of sophistication of the New York bombing. And here's why I say that, and I'm sure he'll relate to this. You know, these individuals in New York, whoever did this could have very well, Leland, had it been a dry run. When you look at the way that they operate, when you look at the type of weapons, these are like homemade bombs that they use, pressure cooker bombs. You can get the materials at the local hardware store. You know, when I look at the targets that they set out for last night, even in New Jersey, Seaside, New Jersey, it tells me by the fact that this wasn't a massive explosion, that doesn't mean that it wasn't sophisticated. What it means is that this was a test. And what you do is, this is how they operate. They test like this on a smaller scale, and then in about 2 to 3 weeks, guess what we're going to see? The real big boom.
Garland, to that point, Rod, if this was a dry run, which is possible, we don't know, 2 or 3 weeks, is that long enough to wrap this investigation up? You think about the pressure cooker, major American city. You have Boston as a script in terms of how this investigation could go. Perhaps added to that, you have the benefit of having one of these devices that didn't explode. That's got to give law enforcement a pretty big jump start if this cell or this group of individuals or individuals planning more attacks.
You know, yes, certainly it's possible that they are. And I had actually thought about the possibility of a dry run. But if you put all 3 of them together, I think that's less likely. It's less likely that we're going to see a dry run in 3 cities, maybe in 1. But it is certainly possible if they weren't connected, maybe that one of the 3 were a dry run. But I think at any rate, you know, we're looking at, for the most part, what we've been looking at in the U.S. so far is lone wolf attacks, and they're going to be sporadic here and there. You know, I used to work with the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, and, you know, unfortunately, one of the discussions that we would have was the reality that if there's really lone wolf attackers are pretty much generally impossible to stop.
So difficult, especially as they can communicate back with ISIS via encrypted communications and those kinds of things. See if that was an issue here. We know the FBI is looking at the guy in Minnesota's electronic devices and social media. Rod, appreciate you being here. Garland, thanks again for sticking around through the 3 p.m. hour.
Thank you.